Hi, today I'm going to be teaching you how to program a simple tic-tac-toe game using Java. So here I have set up my two files, my main file and my game file. In my main class, I have set up a main function and a small title thing for my terminal. This is just so it looks nice. The first thing I want to do is create a new object, new game. And this will start the game. Now, to code the actual tic-tac-toe game, we're going to first look at the variables. So in our class game, we need our board, first of all. So we're going to do a 2D array called board. We're going to make it characters just to make it easier to change around and flip X's and O's and whatnot. Okay, next we need our pointers. So we're going to have a pointer to the rows, and we're also going to have a pointer to the column. Oh, let's be integer. Okay, and then we're also going to have a variable for the player name, so player 1 and player 2. Those will have the names of each player. And then we are also going to have a scanner object using the scanner class in the Java library. I imported it up here using import java.util.scanner. And last, we are going to need a boolean for the win. So this is just going to say, has someone won the game yet? If they have, it will be true. Okay, so those are all of the variables, and now we're going to initialize them in the constructor. So in the constructor, we're going to set the row and the column both to 0. And then we're going to create the new scanner object. This is the constructor takes in a string. It's going to be system.in that just tells the scanner where it takes in the information that it's scanning. So next we're going to create the 2D array. So we're going to have it be 3 by 3, as you can see up here. And we are going to populate it using a nested for loop. Okay, so the outer loop goes through the rows. It'll go through 0 row, 1 row, 2 row, and then the inner loop goes through the columns, so 0, column 1, and column 2. And at each of the points, we are going to so at each point, we're going to put in a dash. And then last but not least, we have to initialize our win condition to false because no one has won the game yet. So I have these 3 getter functions. These are just these are helpful for when we set up in the main file. This returns the player names, player 1 and player 2, and this returns the win. So has someone won the game yet? It'll tell your other file that. So another function we need to create is the display board. So the display board is going to first print out a little message that tells the user that this is the current board. For formatting purposes, I'm just going to put another line before the current board with a /n. And then next, I'm going to loop through the board, the 2D array that we have, and I'm going to print out each different spot. Since we already coded this with these 2 for loops, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste it. And here, instead of this, we're going to print it out. So system.out.print. And we're going to print out the board with the specific row and the specific column. Also, again, for formatting, I'm just going to put another break so that each time it finishes with a row, it's going to move on and skip to the next line, and then also at the end. The next function we have to make is the setup function. The setup function is very straightforward. It's just going to ask the user what the names of the players are, and it's going to put that into our variables. So first message, what is player 1's name? It will go to player 1. We'll take that. Take the user input using the next line command and put it into player 1. And we're just going to do the same thing. And set player 2 to whatever the user inputs. Okay, now that we have their names, we're going to just display the board so they know what it looks like. And we're going to call the function we just created up here. Okay, now that those two are done, we are going to do the actual turn, which will be the body of the game. So in the turn function, we are passing in the name of the player, and we're going to print out a message that says it's their turn. So we're going to say it's player's turn, and then we're going to do another message. It says player, and it tells them to pick a row 0, 1, or 2. Okay, so the user is going to put in a number. For numbers, it's a little tricky because when you take in next line takes in a string. And to convert from a string to an integer, we need to parse it. Parsing should always be wrapped in a try-catch, because if the user inputs a string that cannot be converted into a number, your system is going to throw an error. So we're going to try to parse it, integer.parseInt, whatever they put in, we're going to try to parse it. If it works, it's going to skip this catch. But if it doesn't work, this catch is going to grab the exception. It will find the exception, and then we're going to write a print statement that says it's an invalid input. And we are going to continue. Oh, okay. I'm going to wrap the whole thing in a while loop to make it a little bit more straightforward. So while true. Okay. So if it's an invalid input, it's going to continue. It's going to jump up here, and it's going to say it's their turn, and it's going to tell them to pick a row again. So if all goes well and it works, we're going to tell them or ask them to pick their column. So we're going to say player, pick a column. And we're going to do the same thing we did before, because again, they're going to be putting in a string, because next line is a string, so we need to parse that and make sure it is a number. So try, we're going to say call equals integer.parse, and if it doesn't work, we're going to continue. Okay, now that we have a column, all goes well, we're going to check and make sure that it's a valid row and a valid column. So if the row is less than 0 or greater than 2, or if the column is greater than 2 and less than 0 or less than 0, that's not good. It's out of bounds. We're gonna we're gonna say it's an invalid input because it's not a possible position. So if that doesn't happen, we're still good. It looks good. We're gonna check one more thing. If the board at that spot is not a dash, which means a player's already taken it, we're also going to say someone has already made a move there. So it's going to be, I'm just going to change the error message a little bit. Okay, so if this doesn't happen, this doesn't happen, and there was no exception, we're good. And we're gonna break out of this loop. So this will break out of the while true loop, and we will have an updated row and an updated column. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna call a function called update board with the row, the column, and the player that we just figured out. And we're gonna create that function right now. So the update board function. In the update board function, we're taking in the row, the column, and the player. And we're going to be changing that spot on the board and checking if the game is over. So if the player is player 1, we are going to set the position we're going to set it to X. We're going to call player 1 X. And if that's true, we're also going to display the board one more time. And we're going to call another function that we will make. So this is checking if someone has won the game yet. So if someone has won the game, and that player would have been player 1, we are going to say call the game over function, which we will also write with player 1, because player 1 has just won. So else, that means that player 2 is the player. We will set the row and the column to an O. We will also display the board. And then we will call this again. If the win condition is true, instead of player 1, it'll be player 2. So this is the update board function. It basically changes that position on our 2-dimensional array, and it updates it to the X or the O depending on which player. So the win condition is going to be checking if someone has won the game. So it's going to look, first it's going to look at all the rows. So it'll look at this row, and this row. So for that, we're going to do one for loop. We're going to loop 3 times, so 0, 1, and 2 for each of the specific rows. And we're going to check if the board at that position is equal to the board at I of 1. So this is checking I. So if we're in the first iteration, it's going to look at this, it's going to compare that to this, if they're the same. And also board at I and 1 is equal to board at I and 2. So that's just checking and making sure that this is equal to this and this is equal to this, which means they're all equal. If that's all true, then someone has won. But we also have to make sure and check that board at one of those spots is not a dash, because if it's a dash, that means that no one has played on that row at all and no one has actually won. So if that's all true, we return true because someone has won, and that's checking all the rows. So next we have to check the columns. So the columns are going to be very similar, so I'm just going to copy and paste this, except this is going to be switched, so it's going to just switch the positions. Then this is going to check through the rows and do basically the same thing. Okay, so now we have rows and columns. The last thing we have to do is check for diagonals. Diagonals are, we're just gonna go straight into hard coding it, and we're gonna use 0, 0, which is the top right. That equals the board at 1, 1. And also the board at 1, 1 equals the board at 2, 2. So this is checking the diagonal from the top right to the bottom, top left to the bottom right. if that's all true, and also, again, the board is not a dash, then we also return true. So the other diagonal, again, is similar, so I'm going to copy and paste it. If the board at 2, 0, so top right is equal to 1, 1, and 1, 1 is equal to the board at 0, 2, and the board at 1, 1 is not equal to a dash, we return true. So this covers the 2 diagonal cases. And then if none of those cases are true, we return false. So that condition is done. That function is done. And now we're going to do the last function, which is the game over function. This will set, when it's called up here, it's automatically going to set the global condition to true. Then it's going to do a short message, congratulations, and it'll say who has won. So player has won. For formatting purposes, we will put a new line. So once that's all true, that's basically all the code for the game. And now we're going to actually look at the code itself of the main function and play the game. So in the main function, we created a new game, and then we are going to call our setup function, which basically asks the user who's who, and sets player 1 and player 2. And then we're going to go through the main body of the code, so while true, and we're going to break out of this loop when the win condition has changed to true. So we're going to call actually change this to new game so it's easier. So if new game dot turn, and we're going to pass in the player, so get player 1, and we are going to we're going to check the win. So if the win is true, we break, because someone has won, the congratulations method has been printed, and we have to break out of the body of the code. So then we just do a new turn for the second player, new game, get player 2, and if the new game dot get win is true, again, if it's true and someone has won the game, I'm gonna get rid of the brackets, then we also break. So basically it's gonna loop through the turn of each player over and over until the game has been won. It'll go through player 1's turn. If the game has been won, it'll break. Player 2's turn. If the game has been won, it'll break. And that's basically all the code there is to it. I'm going to save both files, and I'm going to run it. Okay, so now I'm going to run my code. In Terminal, I'm going to open up my new window, and I'm going to run the compile command. So I'm going to compile the main file, and I'm also going to run the main class. So it asks first, what is player 1's name? I'm going to put my name. Player 2's name, I'll put Bob. It'll show the board. Next, it's my turn. I'm going to pick a row. I'm also going to pick a column. Let's go 0, 0. And it lists the current board. Now Bob will pick, let's go 0, 2. And I'll just go for the sake of it. I'll put in this, and then Bob will go 0, 1, and I'll go 2, 2. So I have gotten Tic-Tac-Toe, I've gotten my diagonal, and it'll print out a message, I have won, and then it'll quit, and the program is over. So yeah, that's basically this is how you program Tic-Tac-Toe with Java.